The United States is $38 trillion in debt. That number is so large, it barely feels real anymore. Politicians call it a ticking time bomb. Economists warn of collapse. Commentators predict the end of American power. And yet, the world keeps lending the United States more money. Not less, more. So here's a question no one wants to ask. What if US debt is not a mistake? What if it's not a failure? What if it's the very thing holding the global financial system together? This is the suicide vest theory. In normal life, debt is dangerous. If a person borrows too much, lenders stop trusting them. Interest rates rise, credit dries up. Eventually, they fail. By that logic, the United States should have failed years ago. When US debt crossed $10 trillion, nothing happened. $20 trillion, still nothing. $30 trillion, markets stayed calm. Investors kept buying. There was no panic, no collapse, no loss of confidence. Instead, US debt became more valuable. That's when it becomes clear US debt does not behave like normal debt, because it isn't. Chapter 2. What US debt really is. When the United States borrows money, it issues Treasury securities, Treasury bills, Treasury notes, Treasury bonds. On paper, they're just promises to pay, but in reality, they are the foundation of modern finance. Banks don't just own US Treasuries, they depend on them. Treasuries are used as collateral for loans, backing for derivatives, reserves for central banks, emergency liquidity in crises. In moments of panic, when everything else collapses, money runs towards US Treasuries. In global finance, US debt is treated almost like cash itself, and after the 2008 financial crisis, that role became mandatory. Chapter 3. The invisible handcuffs. In 2008, the global banking system nearly collapsed. Banks owned assets they thought were safe. They were wrong. So regulators asked a brutal question. What assets can survive a crisis? The answer became law. It was called Basel III. Basel III forces major banks to hold high-quality liquid assets, assets that can be sold instantly without losing value. At the very top of that list, United States Treasuries. Not encouraged, not suggested, required. Without treasuries, many global banks would fail regulatory tests. They would be considered unsafe. Some would be illegal. This is the part critics miss. When people say, why doesn't the world stop buying US debt? The answer is simple. Because the global banking system is built on it. Chapter 4. The dollar trap. Every major economy says the same thing. They want less dependence on the US dollar. China says it. Europe says it. Emerging markets say it. But wanting an exit and having one are very different things. Global trade settles in dollars. Global debt is priced in dollars. Global banks need dollar-based collateral. To escape the dollar system, you need an alternative. China tried the yuan, but it's not fully open, not fully trusted, not fully liquid. Gold? Too slow, too hard to move, not flexible enough. Crypto? Too volatile, too unstable. So the world complains, and then quietly buys more US Treasuries. This is the dollar trap. Chapter 5. The suicide vest. Now imagine this. Tomorrow morning, the United States announces, we are paying off our debt. No more treasuries, no more issuance. Sounds responsible, sounds smart. But then it would be catastrophic. Collateral markets would collapse, repo markets would freeze, banks would fail liquidity tests overnight, lending would stop, trade would slow, the system would seize. So the debt cannot be removed. No one can touch it, because touching it destroys everything around it. That's the suicide vest theory. Ending. America's debt looks like weakness, but in reality, it's the anchor of the global system. The world fears it, the world criticizes it, and the world cannot live without it. Until something replaces US Treasuries, no one quits. Not China, not Europe, not the world. Because this debt isn't just America's burden, it's everyone's dependence.